Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lust, the Pond Boss, coming at you from a truly balmy, that's right, balmy, North Texas. Now, if I'd have been able to broadcast last week at this time, I would have said, coming at you from the frozen tundra of North Texas. This time last week, our low was minus 3 degrees, which, like for John Funk and you guys up there in the northern tier, that y'all are kind of used to that. We're not. You know, we're used to balmy weather. So, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're able to join me tonight. Good to see you. I'm seeing lots of folks checking in already. Holy cow, this is going to be a fun night. John Elmer, I see John. Let's see here. Justin Shanks checking in. He's already on here from the left coast. Nick Allen slammed some slabs through the ice last week. You know what? I was too cold to go ice fishing. I think our ice was kind of crunchy though here. I think y'all call it, what do you call it? You got you guys have a word for that where the ice is not so good. Somebody will tell me. Y'all send it to me. Jeffrey Cole checking in. Hey, Jeffrey. Tony Sutton, good to see you, my brother. Blair Ulrich, Danny Mack, happy springtime. Yeah, you know what? We have had an 86-degree swing from minus 3 to 83 in 1 week. And I want to talk about that. How does that impact your pond? I want to share some things about that here in a minute. John Wilson checking in from Florida. Yeah, if you guys have a freeze there, it's on the news, dude. They're in Florida. Mark Hicks, Todd Austin, good to see you. Billy Bates from Southern Maryland. Mike Cottrell. Mike, man, I'd love to hear what happened to you guys in Palapena County. Mike McPherson, good to see you from Indiana. We got a couple folks from Indiana. Look at there. There's Josie and Wayne. Wayne is on the road heading home. Well, if Wayne is in an airplane, he might not be listening, but if he's in a car, he's going to be listening to this show. I got it. I see it. Dan Reesner, hello there. John Schamberger, Kim Moore, Michael Gray. Michael Gray, I know that the sun is probably set, so if you don't have headlights on that track hoe, you might be in your truck headed home or even getting ready to sit down and have a little bit of supper. Richard Barrett checking in from Parker County. I talked to John Barrett today. Had a long, cool conversation with John today. And y'all got to be kin because you both have the same last name spelled the same way. Jeremy Duckworth, Frank James, Chuck Brinkman. Got a text from Chuck a while ago. Chuck's in Missouri out there west of St. Louis. And he sent me a video of his fish eating. After all this weather, the fish are eating. You know, we had... last week, I couldn't broadcast because we didn't have electricity. Now, Vito Barnes, who will be on here in a minute, Vito invited me to come to his house, but my wife said, you know what, I really don't want you out on those icy roads and hunker down with me. Well, Vito has a generator, so his house was full of power. We were on this rolling blackout thing that the governing agency completely butchered here in Texas. Boy, there's some lessons to learn there. Boy, that thing is cascading from the top to the bottom. I mean, when you think about it, when the agency that doesn't manage the power causes folks like us, just, you know, common everyday people, during the peak of the rolling blackouts that we had power about 18 to 20 minutes, then it would be off for 40 to 45 minutes. Then when it come on, 18 to 20 minutes. Now, when the temperature dropped, guess what happened? We had power from 10 to 12 minutes. Then it would be off 45 to 50 minutes. Then when it come back on, so Debbie and I figured out that we could close off 2 rooms and we could have enough heat to keep it in the upper 50s, low 60s, where if you layer up, you know, that's not too bad. Now, everybody up north, y'all are laughing at us, but you know what? When we have ice here, it's usually in a glass of tea. You guys have ice, you're fishing through it. You know, so it's a little bit different ball game there. And so we got to deal with that. And thank goodness none of our pipes froze. We have PEX plumbing, which that helps a whole lot. But when you think about mismanagement of the electrical grid, which is what happened, they weren't prepared for it. You know, if you can't be your best during the worst, What's the point? And that's the way I see it. So then you've got people whose pipes freeze, the pipes in the schools freeze. I was talking to David Nelson today with Karina Mills. His wife, a couple days ago, his wife is a school teacher. Well, she got a call after the temperatures came up. They wanted her to come help clean up the school from where it flooded from this event because they didn't have power, which meant that they had to put school off for a few days, which meant that parents had to stay home, which means that their jobs are in jeopardy. So, but because some stupid agency didn't do their job, Danny Mac. Danny, I don't want to send you off on a rant, but I know you're getting ready to. So, holy cow. Here we go. So what'd that do to your ponds? Hey, you guys know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like. Put hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like. Share this to your timeline. And you are eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. There's one right there. Pond Boss hat. Pretty cool hat. And a Pond Boss mug. Say it with me. That knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. We don't know how it knows, but it does. You're eligible for a drawing. What's really funny to me is about half of you guys said that with me. And now you're laughing about it because you know you did. Yep. And then, hey, look at there. Josie said that this is his last week, Wayne's last week before he retires. That's pretty cool. That is very cool. Kyle Edwards, good to see you. Justin says, the temperature shake is really something. I wonder what happened to some warm water fish. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Well, I'm going to talk about that. Kim Moore, Gregory, I just washed my tongue and I can't do anything with it. Gregory Lee Grimes. Hey, let me tell you about Greg Grimes. Greg is a new sponsor of this show. I talked to Greg yesterday, had a good long conversation. I've known Greg forever, and I'll always remember his backstory. Greg was a student at Georgia, University of Georgia, and he tells me that his backstory was he was studying fisheries management. And they got Pond Boss Magazine back then, and he couldn't wait to get it and read it cover to cover. And I'm not going to take credit for him getting into the fisheries business because he's got a driving passion, but I do know that he was influenced by Pond Boss Magazine. Now, Greg, you can chime in whenever you want to. That's okay with me, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Greg Grimes is a sponsor now with his company, Aquatic Environmental Services. If you want to know about him a little bit more, go to lakework.com and give him a call. He'll give you a cell phone number. And you guys can have a great visit. He works mostly in Georgia. However, he slips over into Texas from time to time. I've got clients in Alabama and Mississippi, Arkansas. Greg he's in the fisheries management business. Now, you saw John Wilson on here earlier. John Wilson teamed up with Greg several years ago and bought part of Greg's company to take care of the vegetation management stuff over there in the southeastern part of the country. So those guys love each other, know each other, have worked together a long, long time. Greg is focused more on fisheries management. So if you're in the southeast, and you don't even have to be in the southeast, he's got clients in Illinois. I mean, he'll go to Illinois. And Greg is a gracious guy. And one of my favorite memories about Greg was he found the Pond Boss Forum. Now, if you want to find the Pond Boss Forum, go to pondboss.com, click on Ask the Boss, and you're going to find the forum. Now, wait till after this show to do it. I don't want to lose viewership because you guys want to go check it out. But Greg Grimes found the forum, and he started answering questions. And one of my favorite things is he started asking questions. To me, that shows the character of people when they want to ask questions to get opinions of other people. It's one thing to be throwing your opinions out there, but it's another thing to want to hear everybody else's opinions. And Greg has done that, and he's been highly successful because he asks questions. And if he takes you on as a client, he's going to ask you a bunch of questions so he can help you get where you want to go based on your goals. Well, if you go to lakework.com, you're going to find Greg. Now, Greg, one of the things I'll always remember, the very first Pond Boss conference we had must have been, oh my gosh, maybe, let's see, my granddaughter is 12. So that would have been like, holy cow, 2007. We had a conference in Arlington, the first one. And Greg one of the things I'd noticed about the Pond Boss Forum is it was becoming a community, which I never saw that coming. And to this day, it still is a community. Well, I remember calling at the end of the conference, "Are you on the forum? If you are, raise your hand." And a bunch of hands went up. So I said, "Some of you guys come up here and tell me what it is about Pond Boss, what it is about the forum, because I'm not quite getting it." Greg came up, and you could see he got a little lump in his throat, and he was talking about how the Pond Boss family helped get him through some pretty emotional times. He and Wendy were struggling to have a baby, and Wyatt was born. One of my favorite pictures of all time is Greg Grimes holding a scale, weighing his baby, hanging him by his bib overalls. Well, Greg Grimes is a premier fisheries biologist, and if you need some help over there in southeast part of the country, well, upper Atlantic coast, central part of the United States, give Greg a call. I'm telling you, that guy is a stud. He knows what he's doing. So shout out to Greg Grimes, and thanks for helping sponsor this show. I appreciate your friendship, and I'm glad you're on board. Good deal. So let's see here. John Funk, Mid-Michigan, our ice is melting. See, that's crazy to me, dude. You know, we shouldn't have ice, and you should. You know, so I want to take a few minutes. Oh, by the way, Pond Boss Magazine comes out every other month. $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. And I promise you, you'll get several nuggets out of each issue of this magazine. Now, the March-April issue is at the printer. We're about to wrap up the resource guide, which we mail every March. We're running a little bit behind on that. But we should be hitting the mail stream by about the 1st of March. That's the good news. The bad news is we go through the U.S. Postal Service. God rest their souls. They can't get anything right. You know, they can't even get the ballots on time. They're still counting ballots from Georgia, because that's where it's mailed from, speaking of Georgia. So anyway, you guys, if you don't mind, if you don't subscribe to the magazine now, please do. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the weather and how that's impacted us. I don't want to get too far out of line here. I want to make sure everybody's going on. Hey, there's Mike Garcia. Hey, Chico, good to see you, buddy. Good to see you, man. Chico's checking in from down at Seguin. Now, Mike Garcia and I are working on some pretty cool stuff, and we're not quite ready to launch it yet, but we're getting close. We've got some premiere content, some videos, and some audio podcasts that you guys that are real serious about this are going to be interested in. And when I get it all lined up, I'm hoping to have it ready to go by the end of March. Then we'll be talking about it. All right, so Todd said, did somebody say ice fishing? No, we didn't. William Jackson, Northeast Arkansas. Richard Barrett, we're kin. You know, the thing I love about that, Richard, you're not saying how. Yeah, but John and I had a really good conversation. One of the topics that John wanted to know about, I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. John Henry, hey Bob, how's ice going to affect our ponds? I'm going to talk about that. Blair Ullring, got to get you out to poetry. I was out at poetry probably 2 months ago. I've got a long-time client that just bought a place out there, and Blair, I'm getting ready to go out there. Scott Hohensee, hey man, what's going on, dude? Scott is with Purina Mills, another one of our big sponsors. Purina Mills, Aquamax Sport Fish Products, best fish foods on the market. Aquamax MVP, keep that in mind. That's a great fish food to feed your fish. It's really weird. We went from minus 3 degrees, 4 inches of rotten ice. That's the term those guys use. We had 4 inches of rotten ice, and it thawed. And today, when I drove by one of my ponds, that we have some Japanese koi, because my wife loves color. Go figure that. She loves oranges and blacks and whites and yellows. They were by the feeder. I went over there and pulled the lid off, had a little bit of feed that was in there, just pitched out some to them, and they ate it. Like, what's up with that? You know, here it was minus 3 last week. Ice just came off on Sunday. The water temperature went from 57 degrees in our ponds in Texas to 33 degrees to a layer of ice to frigid temperatures on top of that ice. Ice melts, and now the water temperature is in the low 50s again. What does that do to your fish? Well, I'm fixing to tell you. I see Billy Bates, Vito Barnes, Mike Cottrell. Scared to see. Ooh, uh-oh, something happened here. Hold up. Good gosh, I'm getting behind. Y'all bear with me 1 minute. I'm going to look at all these questions. I'm looking at my laptop, looking at the questions. My little mouse here gets kind of sticky if I don't lick my fingers. Holy cow. 57 comments. I don't know what's... Oh, there it is. There it is. I got it. I got it. I got it now. I got it now. Okay, let's see here. Scared to see reproductions of the after effects of this ice and what fish it killed off. Yeah, I'm going to hit that. Yeah, right. Yeah, Josie says, right. They have one job. Damn, ERCOT. That's exactly the way I see it. Glad you're back. Good to see you guys. Let's see who was that here. There's Dion Myers, Brent Warman, Bill Russell from South Alabama, South AL, Troy Todd, Kenny Sanderson. Uh-oh, it says my video has been interrupted. Looks like we're still going to me. Danny Mack, John Elmer, Wyatt Koniger, Kenny Sanderson, Pond by Hey, Danny Tolliver. He's over in Bells, Texas. John Henry, oops. Joe Sipes just got back from the pond, caught a dozen of bluegill and one bass in about 20 minutes. Bluegill were tearing up. Aquamax pond was frozen a few days ago. Exactly. There's Morgan Tyler. Howdy, Bob. Howdy, Morgan. Good to see you, buddy. Morgan is also with Purina Mills. You know, and while we're shouting out to sponsors, I want to say hello and thank you to Texas Hunter Feeders. They do an outstanding job. Greg says, too kind. Well, I don't know if I'm too kind. I'm just telling the truth, dude. Danny Mack, 4 F1s in a 1,000-gallon koi pond, 2 feet deep, frozen to 1 feet. Fish are fine and eating pellets without ferment. See, that's pretty amazing. Matt Reardon, John Elmer, how is your project on the paid content educational material? It's almost there. Almost there. Chico, Mike Garcia says, stay tuned. We are almost there. I shipped a hard drive with the rest of the content to Chico, and he's our video editor, and it's just about ready to go. JM10, hope I got that right. Good to see you. Okay, now let's see here. Magazine, yep. Ed Brewer checking in South Carolina. Devin Thompson from Hawaii. You know, one of my favorite things about Hawaii, I got to, actually, I got paid to go do some consulting in Hawaii, which I'll save that story. It's pretty dadgum entertaining, but they have a lake out there not far from Honolulu that has smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, and peacock bass. They really do. It used to be a Dole pineapple irrigation reservoir, but there's 2 ways that lake is fed. One is fed from a mountain stream of snowmelt. It does snow in Hawaii, way up high. So that's cold water coming in. Then it's fed coming off the streets of Honolulu, and that's warm water. That's where the peacock bass live. So it's pretty dadgum interesting. Look at there. There's John Barrett. I figured John might pop in here. Okay. I've got to get a little nectar. Yeah, Frank James says, shouldn't have criticized the folks who control your electricity. The video interrupted as soon as you did. Yeah, I believe that. Dustin Crawley, howdy boss, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Yes, the video is paused twice. I don't know what it is. What is the request to join? Oh, well, the request to join the Pond Boss broadcast. I see those popping in, but if you click on that, then I can invite you on, but I'm probably not going to do that till I know you. Devin Thompson, I got my first peacock out of that lake a few months back. Yeah, I got that. I see that. That's pretty cool. All right, so now let's talk about what this ice has done. Then I want to hit John Barrett's topic, which is a timely one. When the temperatures plummeted, now I've been around a long time. This is my 42nd year doing what I do. I can remember that here in Texas, the deep freeze of 1983-84, which actually lasted longer than this one did. Now, this one happened faster, and it got colder. It got 10 degrees colder here than the one in 83-84. The one in 83-84 lasted longer, but this one got there faster, and it got colder. Now, I think the colder probably is not as relevant, because by the time it got that cold, we had a layer of ice, which insulated the water temperature from changing dramatically. But here's the problem. Our water temperatures were in the mid to upper 50s when this polar vortex, how do you like that term? I kind of like it. Didn't like the effects of it, but I like the term polar vortex. Woo! Came down and swamped all of Texas. This is the only time I think in the history of Texas that all 254 counties were under a winter storm warning. All of them. Well, when our water temperatures were in the upper 50s and this vortex blew through, the temperatures plummeted to the mid to low 30s, like 33, 34 degrees, but it only took 36 hours for that to happen. That is a shock to fish. It's a big shock to fish. That's enough. I'll tell you this. I haven't seen proof yet, but I'm very confident that threadfin shad died all the way to the Rio Grande Valley. Now, the only places they didn't die would be in power plant lakes. How ironic it is to say that word, where the water temperature stayed above 42 degrees. Now, there's a few of those still left in Texas. There used to be a bunch of them until they started shutting down coal-fired power plants. But any of those warm water lakes like that, the threadfin shad are fine. But I'll guarantee you, in all the private fishing lakes in Texas, threadfin shad died. So if you had threadfin shad, like John Barrett, you guys, if you had threadfin shad, they're dead. You're going to want to need to replace them in the springtime if you're managing for largemouth bass. The other thing is, I remember in 83, 84, I was down south of Houston for a few days back then, and I came across a gigantic dead Florida bass, and it was in a shallow rice field pit. There was a fishing club. Now, a rice field reservoir is where they take a track hoe, basically, with a bulldozer and a sheep's foot roller, and they just dig a ditch and build a levee with the dirt around the field. They leave the middle of the field shallow, then they flood it with water so they can pump the water out to flood the rice field. So when the bayou comes up, they pump the water into the rice reservoir, then they use that water to water their rice, to irrigate the rice. Well, one of these lakes was probably 25 or 30 acres, and it was in part of a fishing club, and I picked up that account, and I was working with them, and I got a call. They said, man, we got some pretty big bass dead. So I went down there and looked at it, and I saw this huge bass. I picked it up, weighed it, 15-plus pound bass. Biggest bass I've ever held, dead. And part of its tail was already eaten off by turtles. Well, back then, the lake record or the state record in Texas was being challenged and defeated pretty often. The state record at one point was like 12 and a half, 13 pounds. Then a guy in East Texas broke it twice, like in 1976, at a lake called Echo Lake over near Brownsboro, Texas. You guys that want to check it out, look that up, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Well, this freeze of 83, 84 killed all their big bass. Now, that was one of the experimental lakes where the state of Texas stocked pure strain Florida bass to see if they would make it. Now, those pure strain Florida bass, they didn't die in Lake Fork. Lake Fork's temperature didn't change so fast. But Echo Lake and other private waters that are fairly shallow, how rapid the water temperature changed had a huge impact on killing those gigantic Florida bass. I'm expecting to hear reports from different biologists and landowners in the aftermath of this storm that we had, this big freeze, to hear some stories of some giant Florida bass dying. Now, it doesn't seem to affect the F1s, and it does not affect the Northerners. Northern strain bass are used to that, but the F1s, they're used to it. They can handle it, but pure strain Floridas, they can't. Same with copper-nosed bluegill. I was telling John Barrett today when I was visiting with him, and I've said this on the show, I have literally watched copper-nosed bluegill in water temperatures in the mid-50s, a front blow through. I first noticed it in concrete tanks where I had some. Temperature plummets, they would sink to the bottom and then start to tilt. And the colder it got, pretty soon they're laying flat on the bottom, and you could watch them. They would just stop breathing. They don't breathe. They don't get oxygen. They suffocate. Even if the water is full of oxygen. You know what? If you're not breathing, you're not getting it, you're going to die. And then I started paying attention to it, and I actually went out and watched them do it in ponds. So I expect to hear some stories about dead copper-nosed bluegill as well, especially in shallow waters. So I'm a little bit worried about that. I mean, you guys have probably seen the video that's just gone viral where a wildlife manager down around Mason, Texas, Menard, Texas, was piling up dead axis deer on a trailer. Well, you know, Florida bass are used to Florida. They're used to Alabama, parts of Georgia. They're not used to -3 degrees, you know. And so those animals that are susceptible would succumb. I expect to see some of that. Now, what's amazed me is how the temperature went from here to there. Now it's right back to here, and some of the fish are picking up and going on. You know, Chuck Brinkman sent me a video a while ago of his fish feeding in Missouri, west of St. Louis. And I know his water temperature is not in the 50s. If it is, it's going to be knocking on the door of 50, right at like 49.864 or something. You know, so that temperature is real important. I'm going to scroll down there and see what we got. Jeremy Duckworth, Clark Cole, those hill country axis deer found it tough. Yep, they sure did. They didn't survive it at all. There's Christopher Aguilar checking in. Good stuff. You know what? When John Barrett and I talked today, his question was, you know, I know I'm going to need to restock my threadfin shad, but I keep reading about fertilizing ponds and you know, visibility and kind of how does that work? I see Nick Pittman and Bill Russell checking in. Good to see you guys. Troy Todd's checking in. I see you guys on my phone. I broadcast from my phone. Kyle Edwards. But what I don't see, it doesn't scroll down on my laptop. My laptop, I can actually see the questions and can scroll up and down. Okay, so as I was talking to John, here's the point I want to convey to this audience. John was talking about restocking threadfin shad. I think that's a great idea. I think it's imperative. If you live in an area of the nation where threadfin shad are native, you need to restock them. Now, if you live in Omaha, don't restock threadfin shad. If you live in Nashville, it's kind of a hard decision whether you should or not. You know, so the thing about threadfin shad is they're filter feeders. So John's question to me was, this lake that we managed when we first got it was overtaken by Eurasian water milfoil. We brought a pond management expert in, and he eradicated the fish and eradicated the milfoil. But then, you know, we're having a hard time trying to decide how to manage a plankton bloom or how to manage the bloom. So he needed a little bit of schooling on what a plankton bloom is. So I'm going to throw that out there for you guys to learn about. When you've got nutrients dissolved into the water, when you've got nutrients dissolved into the dirt, Mother Nature is going to take advantage of that food. Now, in a pond, that's nitrogen and phosphorus. They don't need much potassium, but a little bit. But they mainly need phosphorus. Now, in parts of the country like Montana, Michigan, Minnesota, we're not going to talk about fertilizing ponds because you guys have too much phosphorus. But in the South, we don't have enough, oftentimes. So when we put fertilizer out, what the fertilizer does is dissolves into the water, and it promotes the growth of microscopic plants called phytoplankton. Now, phytoplankton is mostly algae. Now, when I was talking to John, I was kind of coaching him how to read the bloom. And so what was going on, what we were trying to talk about, is I said, you know, you got to judge a couple of things. You got to judge the visibility of the water, how deep down can you see, and then what's the color. Now, when I ask somebody the color of the water, they're going to tell me green. Well, that ain't good enough. What I want you to tell me is what's the shade of green. Because when you grow, you get that plankton bloom, you got phytoplankton. Phyto means plant, and then plankton, microscopic little bitty pieces of algae. Now, when that stuff grows, it grows because it's got sunlight, the temperature is correct, and there's food dissolved in the water column for those. So they absorb that nutrient and they feed on it. They get their energy from the sun and they thrive in that temperature. Now, as phytoplankton grows in a perfect world, and really in a real world, it's going to feed zooplankton, which is animal plankton. That's amoebas, parameciums, things like that. So these animal plankton are coming over here eating the plant plankton, and the water color kind of gives you an idea as to the status of that. So when you've got a pea soup green pond in April, that's a pretty good plankton bloom that's getting ready to feed a whole lot of zooplankton, but the color is going to shift. So part of your job is to read that bloom. Now, what I mean by reading the bloom is judge the visibility. Your goal in the springtime is to have 18 to 24 inches of visibility. If you've got that in the springtime when the water temperature is 60 to 70 degrees, you're in good shape. And then the zooplankton start to eat and take over part of the population, so the water shifts from that bright green to more of an olive green. And then from olive green, it shifts to kind of an olive brown to a brownish olive, because those animal plankton, the zooplankton, they're brown colored for the most part, or white or dark, but they're not green. So the watercolor shifts from bright green, olive brown, brownish olive to brown. And then when that happens, the zooplankton run out of food, and if they don't get eaten, they die and they sink to the bottom, and the water clarity goes up. So if you're measuring water clarity and you're checking out the color of the water, and you can read that color, when you start to see it shift to more of a brownish color from green, that's your trigger, that's your symbol to go ahead, that's your signal to go ahead and fertilize again. Now, every time you fertilize, you're going to fertilize with the recommended dose that's on the bag, but every time you do it after the first time, you're cutting the dose in half. So be paying attention to that. Now, right now is not the time to do it. Do it when the water temperature is above 55, going up. That's when you want to fertilize. Now, if you're north of the Mason-Dixon line, don't fertilize unless you're talking to somebody that knows what's going on. Then you can make the decision on what to do. So let's see here. Micah Trail, how will channel catfish handle the extreme cold? I'll tell you exactly what channel catfish do. Channel catfish will bundle up in a big school and lay in the deepest part of the pond where there's adequate oxygen that they don't suffocate. So there might be 1,000 channel catfish wadded up in a 3-foot thick layer in an area not any bigger than your bedroom. So if you can find them, you can catch them because they'll eat, but they don't generate heat. But when an animal moves, it does generate a little bit of heat. So channel catfish, they're going to survive the cold just fine. They don't go dormant, they just go slow. So they do that. So Kenny Sanderson, Kenny, we need to talk. I'm getting ready to move your fish tanks up to our office tomorrow or the next day. Your pond is 90 to 95% covered in floating filamentous algae. Golly, you know what? I looked at one of my ponds today and I saw little mats of periphyton floating. That pond had 4 inches of ice on it on Saturday. Had 3 inches of ice on Sunday. The ice started to go away on Monday. It was totally gone yesterday. Now I'm seeing little silver dollar sized patches of periphyton floating up from the bottom. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, don't do anything about it. Now, if you're seeing floating filamentous algae, odds are high that you had that filamentous algae before this cold snap hit. And the cold snap killed it, and now it's floating to the top. Because once it dies and it gets a little bit of heat from the sun, it starts to decompose. It's going to break loose and float. Now, if it's bright green, that means that there's some down there that's still alive. If it's kind of a greenish yellow or a yellow brown, it's dead. Now, if it's floating, it's dead. But what you got to decide is there any algae coming up from it that's still alive? And then what's going to happen with that? And if you think you want to treat it, look at using a chelated copper compound, a chelated copper algicide, but read the label. Follow that label. Christopher Aguilar, did we talk about transferring fish from public water to our ponds yet? I've talked about that before, but you know what? Let me hit that right quick. Let's see. Greg Grimes says strip mine pits up north might need some nutrients also. Almost every strip mine pit needs nutrients, and almost every strip mine pit needs some water amendment besides fertilization. Oftentimes they need lime. So, you know, one of my favorite terms that I use a lot is happy water. You know, if you've got a strip mine pit, if you bought a gravel pit, you just bought a farm that's got a pond on it, you need to check the water chemistry to make sure that the water's happy. The things you look at, alkalinity, you know, everybody says look at pH, but pH is like a ruler. It's just a measurement. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just tells you that the water's either basic, which is alkaline, or it's acidic. And when you see that, then you got to decide what do you do about it. You know, if it's acidic, you can add lime. If it's too basic, what are you going to do? You know, so there's a number of things you can do, but happy water is the very, very first thing that you got to think about. So let's see here. Christopher says, do we talk? You know, I'll tell you this. I'm not a big fan of transferring fish from public waters. I'm not a big fan of transferring fish from that pond to that pond. And I'll tell you why. If you want to do it, go do it. But here's what you should expect. When you take an adult fish that's grown up in that environment, there's this term, you've heard me use it before, called plasticity. That fish thrived in that environment, has grown up in that environment. And even though your environment may be better, you take the fish out of what it's used to and put it into what you want it to get used to, that don't mean it will. You know, a lot of times those fish will go from pond A to pond B, or public lake gigantic to private lake small, and they don't make the transition. Now, if you want to try to enhance genetics in the fish you catch, you know the genetics of that fish, that's okay if they'll reproduce. But if you're expecting to go take a 4-pound bass that you caught out of Lake Norman in North Carolina and put it in your pond in South Georgia, and that fish is going to grow to double digits, forget it. It ain't going to do it. Odds are high that that fish will decline in condition because it grew up over there and it can't make the transition. You know, fish can't think. They can't reason. You know, they can't be sitting there ready to ambush something and they look up and say, well, there goes a bluegill. I think I'll eat that. Or wait. Well, hold up. There's a school of threadfin shad. Oh, that's a goldfish over there. I'm going to pass on. They don't do that. They act on instinct and conditioning. And the environment that they're conditioned to is the one they grow up in. And it's no automatic guarantee that they're going to convert their conditioning to what your body of water has to offer. That's why I'm not a big fan of moving fish from lake gigantic to pond mediocre. I'm not. I just don't think it makes good sense. Let's see here. We got a little conversation going on. Okay, Justin Mitchell, seeing a lot of algae now. Justin, I don't remember where you are, but you know what? There are areas, and I'll tell you this, when the water temperature goes from hot to cold back to warm, you can pretty well bet you're going to start seeing some algae right now. Now, I had a talk with a guy in Missouri today, Evan Breaker, over there west of St. Louis, southwest of St. Louis, a fair good ways away from Chuck Brinkman, and he wanted to buy some pond dye and put it in his pond. And his pond's covered in rotten ice. Well, his premise is if I put the pond dye in now to minimize the UV ray penetration of the sun into my pond, can I interrupt the life cycle of filamentous algae? The answer to that is yes. Now, his question to me was, how much do I put? My answer was, I don't know. You know, follow the label. But here's the mission. If you want to have a good plankton bloom while you do what you can to be proactive and prevent the growth of filamentous algae, then what your goal is you want to put the dye in and then let the water be clear by the time it hits 60 degrees. Now that's a little bit of a guessing game, and the guessing game is based on what kind of flow rate you've got and how long that dye lasts in your pond before it fades out and goes back to the natural color of the pond. Now, when we had the conversation, then he called me back. He said, I just read on the label that this dye is going to turn my pond blue. Yes, it is. It's going to turn your pond blue because that's what the shade of the color is that interferes with the penetration of ultraviolet rays from the sun. So that's kind of how that works. Frank James went from 2 Canada geese to 24 during the big chill. My pond didn't freeze, and I guess a lot of others did. Will they leave on their own, or will they need some encouragement? They'll probably leave on their own. You know, is what they're going to be doing. Canada geese, the reason they came to your pond is because the water was open. Now, if you think about that, that makes pretty good sense. And it makes sense because if the water is not frozen, it has to be warmer than 32 degrees. And if the air is -3 and the water is 32.2, that water's warmer and the geese can live in that. So now that the water has opened up and the temperatures have risen over near Longview, Texas, Marshall, Texas, East Texas, over toward the Louisiana border where Frank is, those geese should go on because now they need to go eat. You know, they sat on your pond so they wouldn't die from being frozen, you know, and now they need to go find food. So I bet you if they don't stay there all the time, they're going to be gone. Let's see here. Christopher says, Argalar, just meaning the bloodlines off of the transfer. That's okay. If you want to go get a few fish because you want to improve the genetics of your pond, that's okay. Do it now. Don't do it in April. Don't do it in July. Do it now. If you want to bring in some new fish to reproduce with your fish, that's I'm okay with that. Just go get some of them, bring them in there, but know what you're doing. Know what you're bringing in there. That's good. Justin Mitchell, Mineola, East Texas. Man, I know about Mineola. I'm going to scroll back up here and make sure I haven't missed anything. Y'all bear with me. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about this temperature influence. Make sure I haven't missed any questions because sometimes they come by so fast that I miss them. Okay, I think I got them all. Let's see. Jeremy Duckworth says, I really enjoyed the January, February issue. You know what's crazy is some of the January, February issues are just now hitting the mailbox. Golly. Not only is ERCOT incompetent, the United States Postal Service is incompetent. And you know what? I can kind of tolerate that a little bit because of the overwhelming demand for their services. But you know what? Just step it up a little bit. You know, I made an IRS payment for my last 2020 tax payment, and it had to be there by January 31st. I mailed it January the 1st. It hadn't hit the bank yet. Leanne has checked the tracking number. U.S. Postal Service, in transit, in transit, in transit. So am I going to get to pay penalties and interest because they didn't do their job? We'll see. All right, so I'm going to scroll on down here and then we're going to hit some more fun topics. I think if I've missed your question, write it again and I'll see if I can hit it as we go. Christopher Aguilar hasn't gotten his yet. Those January, February issue magazines were mailed December 23rd, and we've gotten probably 2 phone calls a week since the 1st of February from people that haven't gotten their dadgum magazine that was mailed December 23rd before Christmas. I don't get aggravated, so I'm not going to get aggravated. That's a red blend, by the way. It's a box wine. He didn't really say that. Let's talk a little bit more about what a frigid outbreak like this does. Here's your main take-home point about cold weather. It's more important how fast the temperature falls as it is how cold it gets. I mean, the temperature can only fall so far, so fast, and then ice forms. Once the ice forms, then your pond is protected. So my pond froze over, all my ponds, all 8 of them, froze over 4 inches thick when we hit -3 degrees. Well, the ponds weren't impacted by that. Now, our electric bill will be impacted by it. We had to wear 3 layers of clothes, so we were impacted by it, but our pond wasn't. But what our ponds were impacted by was going from 56, 57 degrees to 33 degrees in a day and a half. That's what impacts it. Now, I'm getting ready to take a seine and go do some seine samples with a couple of guys tomorrow and the next day, because it's going to be plenty warm enough to do that, just to see if I can seine up any dead fish. And I'll let you know if I do. I don't think we will. But anytime you have a deep freeze like that, it's got consequences in nature. You know, I saw pictures of dead roadrunners. I saw pictures of dead robins. I've seen pictures of other dead species of birds. I've seen pictures of dead mammals. Saw a picture of a dead possum that froze to death. Now, how a possum froze to death probably deserved it. Get a Darwin Award, because possums usually go hang out somewhere where they can at least be somewhat insulated from it. But I'm going to give you this advice. If you went through this deep freeze, I would look at doing some kind of an evaluation of your fishery within the next 60 days. Now, if you want to hire a biologist, do that. You can go to pondboss.com, click on the resource guide, or send an email to info@pondboss.com, and we will refer you to somebody to kind of wrap your brain around the consequences of what happened with this winter event. Because you don't want to find out about it in 18 months because the pond has responded to whatever happened with this event. It would be much, much better to know going into the spring season. That way you can do something about it. You know you lost thread fins. Anybody that had tilapia all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley, they died. You know, which down there, that's a good thing. Up here, you expect it. But threadfin shad, you want those. You know, so I'm going to tell you, going and checking that out, it's a good idea. Hey, let's take a minute. Let's take a minute. Pond Boss Magazine. Go to pondboss.com. Click on subscribe. $35 a year. I'm telling you, I already said it once in the show. Cheaper than a Friday night date. I promise you, $35. You're not going to spend $35 on a Friday night date with your better half. You're going to spend $70. You know, and then the next day, that's gone. Well, this lasts a year. Pond Boss Magazine. And seriously, this is what fuels the economy of being able to do this. This with some sponsorships fuels the economy of Pond Boss so we can keep this thing going. So if you haven't subscribed to Pond Boss, please do. It's worth it. I'm telling you. There's so much information in here that you can use. You know, I've got a number of experts that write for the magazine. Greg Grimes has written for the magazine in the past. You know, and we'll probably lean on Greg to do some more. But what you get is real world knowledge. This is not something coming out of a book. This is something coming out of life. This is coming out from people that have done it. You know, so $35. It sounds like it's high. It's not. Go price a bass boat. Go price a new lake. Go buy 100 catfish fingerlings. You know, $35. It's well worth it. So now that I've shamed you into subscribing, thank you. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like. Share this to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug. So let's hit some more topics here. Let me see what we got here, folks. Let's see here. Mark Dyer, in shallower northern ponds and lakes like in Nebraska, how long can it take for ice covered and thicker snow negatively affect the lake oxygen levels, causing partial kills, etc.? What he's asking is about winter kill. So what happens, water can only obtain oxygen 2 ways. One is absorption from the atmosphere. The other is from photosynthesis of plants. Now, what you know about photosynthesis is that water's got plants have got to come in contact with the sun. They get their energy from the sun. So when the sun is shining, they take up carbon dioxide and they give up oxygen, which is absorbed into the water. So when you've got a layer of ice that's covered with a layer of snow, you don't have any sunlight penetration. So you're not getting photosynthesis. You're not getting communication between the pond water and the atmosphere, so it can't absorb it. So whatever's oxygen levels are in the water can be depleted. That's what happens when we're talking about winter kill. What happens during winter kill is there's more oxygen being consumed than can be provided. And as it's consumed, when it gets down to a certain level, it's toxic to fish. And most of those oxygen levels that kill fish depends on the species. You know, gizzard shad die at about 3 parts per million. Largemouth bass die at 2.2. Bullheads die at 1.1. You know, and so how long can it take? The time frame that it takes for animals, fish to die is totally dependent on how much consumption there is. So if there are plants in the pond under the water, if there's still a remnant plankton bloom going in the winter, or if there's plants that have gone mostly dormant, when it gets dark, the plants absorb oxygen, give off carbon dioxide. The plants are consuming it. Detritus on the bottom of the pond is consuming oxygen. So depending on the rate of consumption, that's going to determine the risk of a winter kill. The longer your pond sits under ice, the higher the risk of a winter kill. Now, the partial winter kills, when it's a partial winter kill, that means that the oxygen levels got to that lower lethal point for that species of fish. Now, crappie, bluegill, bass, they all have a similar lower lethal. But gizzard shad have a higher lower lethal. Bullheads have a lower lethal. So you might lose all your gizzard shad and maybe a percentage of your bass, no bluegills, no pumpkin seeds, and no catfish. You know, so it all hinges about where the oxygen levels get. Now, here's something else that's pretty interesting. In different ponds, different depths, different water has a different demand. So I've actually seen ponds where there's been partial kills in the winter because fish happen to be congregated in an area where consumption was higher. And all the fish died there, but on the other side of that 5-acre lake, oxygen levels stayed up high enough, and those fish in that part of the lake didn't die. So that's how you can also have a partial kill. Danny Mac said the birds were frantic for water. That's exactly right. Chris Arthur, watching lake area pond management. That sounds like our good friend Ron Ardway. Mark Hicks, if I put pond dye in my pond now, will it prolong the natural warming of my pond? Or will it heat up faster because of the darker tinted water? It will have no effect on temperature. Muddy water, where there's suspended colloidal clay, changes temperatures much more slowly than clear water. Clear water absorbs the rays of the sun and the heat much more quickly than muddy water, which has a tendency to deflect or reject the warming rays of the sun. Clark Cole says, I've heard that fish in cold water can have a critical amount of energy to survive, and overspending energy or overexertion can wind up causing them to die. So do you know at what temperature catching them by fishing it is safe? Let's see. Let me read that question to myself. Okay, here's going to be my answer. That's a great question. That's an intellectual question. I would not think anything less if Clark Cole didn't ask that question. Clark worked for me in the 80s. His hair is now more gray than mine, and he's way younger. Let's see here. Let me tell you, I'm going to answer that. Catching a fish in cold water, that fish is not going to overexert its energy because it's cold. Now, what it will do is it'll fight, but it's not going to fight like it would if it was warm. So they're not going to overexert to the point that using that energy is going to cause them to succumb. Now, what's going to cause them to succumb would be the stress of handling. You know, if you take a fish out and you handle it in cold weather, that water temperature might be 39 or 40 degrees and the air temperature might be 17. So you pull that fish through a hole in the ice and you hold it up for pictures, it's going to go from 40 degrees to 22 really quick. So you better get it back down in the water. But it will not overexert itself to the point that it will die in cold weather. It will give up the fight much more quickly and not exert that amount of energy. And if you think about it, think about catching a 10-inch bluegill through the ice in winter compared to catching one, in August. When you catch one in August, that sucker's running in a bunch of clockwise circles, trying to get off the hook. When you catch one in under the ice, it's not fighting a whole lot. Matter of fact, you can barely feel the tick of the bite. So they are not going to overexert. So if you catch a fish in cold weather, that's okay. It's not going to overexert. Kenny Sanderson says, price a dozen smallmouth bass if you think the magazine. He's exactly right. A dozen smallmouth bass, $60, $5 a piece. Hey, $35, Pond Boss Magazine. Here it is, fresh off the presses. Well, fixing to be fresh off the presses again. Frank James, diversity is important. Northern largemouth bass, F1, Florida, bluegills, coppernoles, red ear. That way you're covered. You know what? That's exactly right. And I tell you this, we're about to run out of time, but I'll tell you this. That 83, 84 freeze and the 89 freeze completely shifted the way that I thought about stocking lakes and ponds. Now, I pretty much hedge my bets by doing exactly what Frank said. And I figured that out in 1985 after that freeze hit, 84 or so. I stopped stocking pure strain Florida bass in North Texas, Southern Oklahoma, Central Texas. Started mixing them up. Back then, you couldn't get F1s. Nobody did that back then. But you could take pure strain Floridas, pure strain Northerns, stock them, wish them luck, knowing that at some point they'd cross on their own. So diversity is a big deal. So when you're thinking about how you're going to stock your pond, think about that. Jason Rutledge. Bob, how do you maintain good water quality and clarity in a brand new pond that have no vegetation to stop muddy runoff? It seems circular. Can't clear it up because no vegetation because it's muddy. Well, the sooner you can vegetate the ground around it and stop the source, then you're going to increase your odds of having water clarity. If you can't get the water clear, then do a simple little jar test. Take several gallon jugs, glass jugs of water, set them on a shelf. See if they settle out. If they don't, see how much gypsum it takes to clear them up. If that doesn't work, let's have a conversation about alum. Now, don't go do alum until you talk to somebody that knows what they're doing. But you can, once you stop the source of mud coming in with vegetation, then you can increase your odds of success of getting the water clear. And when the water clarity goes up, the vegetation will take care of itself. Rick Morrison, 22-acre lake, 13-foot maximum depth. Drained it, rope known 18 months ago. Stocked bluegill and red ear and fatheads 15 months ago. Bass in 20,000 threadfin shad 10 months ago. I've seen 20 threadfin fish kill last couple of days. Do I figure I lost all the shad? Jacksonville, Texas. I would almost bet on it. Because when those threadfin shads start to die, there's no ice on the water. Now, the thing about threadfin shad is they don't have an air bladder. So when they die, they sink. Now when they get ready to die, they're coming to the surface trying to find heat. That's when you see the terns or the seagulls coming in to clean them up. But if 200 died, I'd pretty well bet the rest of them did. However, confirm that. But I'm going to tell you, I believe with every ounce of my fisheries biologist soul that those threadfin shad died. Kyle Edwards, I'm nervous about fertilizing my lake. I'm not sure if I can afford to stick with the program for the long haul. Is it true that if you start to fertilize and get away from it, it'll make the pond worse off than before you started? That's a maybe. The thing about fertility, the fertilization is the least expensive thing you can do to increase productivity. It's cheaper than a feeder, cheaper than fish food. So if you start a plankton bloom and you don't mind spending, $20 an acre of water to fertilize it, then you can maintain that plankton bloom. Now, when you stop fertilizing, then your productivity is going to decrease. And that's not necessarily unnatural. If that's okay with you, that's okay with me. That's the difference between having a standing crop of 50 pounds of bass per acre compared to 80 pounds of bass per acre. So that is a management decision. And a management decision is oftentimes made on a budget. So what you have to decide is can I live with the productivity with this? Now, one of the downsides to not having fertilization, if you don't have a plankton bloom and your water clarity goes up, you're going to have moss. You're going to have a lot of plants. And that's, you might be trading problems, and it's still cheaper to buy some fertilizer. Fertilize the pond. That's what I'm going to tell you. That doesn't cost much. Let's see here. We talk about water clarity in a retention pond. Sure. Water clarity, I'm going to keep going for a while because I'm seeing some questions that need some attention. You talk about water clarity in a retention pond. I'm not quite sure which angle you want me to come at from that, Chris, so I'm going to hit it this way. If you're asking me what is a good water clarity, a visibility depth, I'm going to tell you for the most part in the spring and summer, if your water clarity is 18 to 24 inches, that's about perfect. If it's more than that, you're going to encourage rooted aquatic plant growth. If it's less than that, then your plankton bloom can get out of hand and turn into blue-green algae. So, 18, 24, 30 inches of visibility is good. So if that's what you're talking about, there's your answer. If it's not, pin me down with another question. Jeremy Duckworth, in the latest issue, there's an article about hybrid bass. How many would you recommend adding to a 6-acre pond to help cull excess small bluegill and increase sport fishing? Hybrid bass. I'm going to presume, you guys are going to probably laugh at this, but when I write articles or edit articles for the magazine, I don't retain that. It doesn't stay in my mind. I have to go back and look it up. Matter of fact, I have a magazine. Let me look it up so I can give you a good answer. Let's see here. I think you're talking about hybrid striped bass. I hope that's the case. Let me look here. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. Hybrid striped bass. Okay, there it is. I got it. Yep. All right. How many would you recommend adding to a 6-acre pond? You know what? I'd stock 20 to the acre. Now, that's assuming 20 to the acre, you're going to have some attrition, which is completely normal. I mean, you stock 20 and you get 10 to adulthood, you did pretty good. So there's the answer I'm going to give you, 20 per acre in a 6-acre pond. 120 to 150. Let's do it that way. Mark Dyer, pond is stained very green, has a cloudy, wispy substance to it. Cloudy meaning cloudy green. Okay, I could even see it in my ice hole. I like that. What is the wispy cloud substance in the water? We did flood a year ago, which could have had field runoff. That's going to be algae. So you probably got some real wispy pieces of Pithophora or one of the different kinds of angel hair looking filamentous algae. Now, right now, it's probably not going to cling to a hook, but once the water temperature goes up, you're going to start to see it having some consistency to it. Vito, do bluegill fight in counterclockwise circles south of the equator? You know what? Let me run down there and look, but I'm going to tell you they probably do. Danny Mac says, what do you think about circumventing the bloom in return for feed? I love that, especially in water chemistry that's not happy. I'd much rather feed the fish and circumvent the bloom than try to create one or deal with one. So I kind of like that. There's Travis Paul Smith. He's checking in. Jeremy Duckworth, you're welcome. Hey, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I really appreciate you tuning in. Oh, hey, I got a little news here. We closed on the sale of Lusk Lodge Comma 2 yesterday. So by next Tuesday, the Queen and I will be homeless. We're going to be headed down to Running River Ranch near Brenham and hang out in the RV. There is no internet connection down there that's worth a crap. So I'm going to have to go find an internet connection or figure out how to have internet so I can broadcast from the RV. So in the meantime, our deal funded today, so we have a few dollars. We made an offer on a house, which I don't expect to get because we are one of 5 offers. But our lives are about to change, but I'm not bailing out. So I'm excited to spend more time with you guys. But next week, it probably won't have that Pond Boss sign behind my head. If I have to do it from my truck, I'll do it from my truck. But in the meantime, we're going to be hanging out, and we're going to be praying about what we do next. And we deeply appreciate you guys hanging out with us. And Josie, you know what? We're going to connect up here before long. Wayne's about ready to retire, another week or so, and we're going to spend a little time together. So, not Glen Road. Yeah, actually, you know what? Hey, Clark, we made an offer on a house at Pecan Plantation. I don't expect we'll get it because we're one of 5 offers and we didn't go above the asking price, but we'll see. So, I'm pretty excited about it. And Kenny, you and I need to talk. Let's do that tomorrow if you got time. Landon, good to see you, buddy. Appreciate it. So until next Wednesday, from wherever I am, it might be a barbecue joint somewhere hanging out with Chico. But we will come at you live next Wednesday, wherever I am. So until then, thanks for watching. Adios.